Hi, I'm Tom Fitton, President of Judicial Watch, here with Judicial Watch's weekly update on Facebook Live. Thanks for joining us again. If you tuned in earlier this week, you learned some big news in the IRS scandal, which is continuing because as best we can tell, the IRS is still refusing to stop using the illegal criteria they set out in 2010 and 2011 and 2012 to suppress the Tea Party. Yeah, they're still trying to figure out who the Tea Party groups are, it looks like, and still stalling the applications that some of these groups have. Some of them still have yet to get their applications approved by the IRS. But more importantly, we've got information showing recently that the Democrats in the Senate, specifically Sheldon Whitehouse, a powerful Democrat from Rhode Island, wanted the Justice Department to prosecute the very groups the IRS was suppressing. And he went so far, and we have the document showing, to send a list of suggested targets, which included Crossroads GPS, the group run by Karl Rove. So if you think the IRS scandal was bad, you don't know the half of it, in the sense that there was this conspiracy with Democrats in the Senate and elsewhere to actually prosecute the very groups that Lois Lerner's IRS was suppressing. And so when you hear people trying to downplay the IRS scandal, it was pretty bad when it just involved the IRS. But the fact that you had the Justice Department, the FBI working with Democrats in the Senate, figuring out ways to prosecute innocent Americans for exercising their First Amendment rights, it continues to be a crisis in a sense. Unless there's accountability, it can, I guarantee you, will happen again. I know Hillary Clinton and the Clinton administration also abused the IRS, and I know many on the left are concerned about how Donald Trump might use the IRS. So I think we need to talk about seriously reforming the IRS in a way to remove it as a threat to the First Amendment. And along those lines, there has to be accountability. And I talked earlier this week about impeachment of John Koskinen. John Koskinen is probably a name you're not familiar with, but he's the IRS Commissioner, and he was appointed by President Obama. Now, there are only two appointees in the IRS that are political appointees, the IRS Commissioner and I think the General Counsel. So there's a move to impeach Koskinen, or at least there was, and there was a floor vote that was scheduled for impeachment, but the conservatives, so-called conservatives in the House, decided many of them didn't want to proceed because they didn't think they'd have the votes or for whatever reason, so they kicked the can down the road. And so the current plan is to have an impeachment hearing with Mr. Koskinen. We know how that will go. And to maybe have an impeachment vote, if at all, in the lame duck. Now, you may have heard the phrase lame duck Congress and lame duck, but it really is a process that's inimical to representative government, because it allows the Congress, many of whom will be turned out in November, to come in after that election and vote on key issues like impeachment, like big budget bills. Currently, the plan by the Republicans, by the way, is to fully fund all of Obama's illegal activity and all the terrible things they tell us about. So they're going to fully fund it, even though they say it's terrible and unconstitutional, and then come back in the lame duck and then probably fund it again for a good period of time, as opposed to doing what they're supposed to do prior to elections so that they can be held accountable to the American people. Now, I don't know what you think. Do you think Republicans and Democrats are more or less likely to vote for impeachment of the IRS Commissioner before or after the election? Well, the brilliant Republicans think it's more likely to happen after the election. And so I think you need to share your views with your members of Congress that you believe that Mr. Koskinen, sooner rather than later, needs to be impeached. If you believe those, if you don't believe that, let them know as well. I don't want to tell you what to say, but if you think this issue is important, if you think this IRS corruption is important, it's on the front burner now in Congress and the House, and they're trying to avoid dealing with it directly by kicking it down the road past the election. So this is the time to make your views known to the Congress. Other big news this week, and it just was released, I guess yesterday or the day before, we have these new State Department documents showing 3 years ago, the State Department was raising questions about Clinton emails. Now to remember, they didn't formally request Mrs. Clinton's emails back, despite her taking them at the end of 2012, beginning in 2013, until the end of 2014. But in the middle of 2013, just a few months after she left, they started asking questions about her emails. Now recall, there was this Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, which is a left-wing group that was modeled on Judicial Watch, believe it or not. And they had asked for documents about Mrs. Clinton emails. Alias accounts. They were doing a wide-ranging investigation to find out which government officials had alias accounts. And the State Department, shortly after Clinton left office, told them there were no responsive documents, which was an out-and-out lie. An out-and-out lie. So after that response, they started asking questions about what other requests are there related to Clinton emails. And there were at least 17 requests. Now, why would they be asking about that? Why would they be asking about that? Because the agency knew what was up, and they knew there was going to be reckoning. And one of the cases they mentioned specifically was the Judicial Watch case, where we were asking about Mrs. Clinton's conflicts of interest documents, where she was supposed to have her husband's speeches and business plans and consulting agreements vetted by the Obama administration's ethics officer there in the State Department. And it turns out that Judicial Watch's investigation ultimately found that pretty much the vetting was essentially a rubber stamp, and there were at least 215 speeches to everybody, every foreign potentate you can think of, and major corporation here, that was approved as not being a conflict of interest, when evidently and obviously it was. I mean, why would you think getting money, the spouse of the Secretary of State getting money from a foreign government or foreign front would not be a conflict of interest? But I guess that's the rules in Clinton land, and that's the rules with the Obama administration. But again, this document shows, and the press release, we're going to be talking about it in the weekly update this week, the email that we send out. If you're not getting it, you can go to our website and get it. The document shows that, the emails show that they were asking about Clinton emails in 2013, again, 3 years ago. We're still waiting for all the Clinton emails, by the way. And so it kind of shows, but it suggests that the Obama State Department obviously knew about the Clinton emails early on, despite their protestations to the contrary, and but they covered it up. And this criminal investigation that Congress is talking about into Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton's emails, and whether she lied or not, it's got to include the Obama administration. So that's one of the big gaps in logic that was missing in discussions about the Clinton email scandal. It's an Obama administration scandal as well. And that's one of the reasons the Obama administration is terribly interested in uncovering what Mrs. Clinton was up to, because it would show their complicity in this conspiracy to avoid and violate the law, which includes the Federal Records Act, which includes the Freedom of Information Act, which includes the maintenance and preservation of government property, the mishandling of classified information, and all sorts of other laws. So a lot going on here. We've got the end of next week, next Friday, the government is supposed to come in, the State Department, and explain to Judicial Watch and the court how long they're going to take to get the deleted emails that were turned over to them by the FBI, the nearly 15,000 emails, out to the American people. The court in that case was pressing the State Department to move more quickly. But remember, there are 15 or so thousand emails that Mrs. Clinton tried to delete that were undeleted by the FBI or otherwise found, that the State Department is supposed to release pretty quickly. And so we're going to find that out on Friday, September 23rd. So that's going to be an important development as well. So stay tuned to Judicial Watch and our Facebook Live for more discussions here. Before I go, great news on our bestseller book, Clean House, Exposing Our Government Secrets and Lies. If you haven't bought it, you've got to buy it. You help Judicial Watch by buying it, you educate yourself by buying it, and you make a statement to the big media that this issue is important, our corruption. And it's a great field guide to government corruption. But I'm pleased to announce, thanks to those of you who've already bought it, that it's going to appear on the New York Times bestseller list. So this is now a New York Times bestseller, thanks to the support of folks like yourselves watching this. But if you haven't bought it, please do buy it. It's a great read. You won't be wasting your money. You'll be supporting Judicial Watch, and it's an essential educational document, this book. It tells you the background on the Clinton emails, some great IRS material. Fast and Furious, remember that scandal? Hundreds of people dead thanks to President Obama's gun program that sent guns to Mexico. Important story. Benghazi, and of course election integrity. And that issue continues to heat up. The left is obsessed. And we just had some hearings this week. We were there observing them because we represented one of the individuals involved in a dispute. But you've got the left even attacking the very notion in federal courts, and the federal courts kind of looking the other way and not supporting good government here, in a sense of the feds and the left trying to make sure that any laws related to voter ID, and more specifically this week, whether or not you can ask someone whether they're citizens before they register to vote, would be allowed. And I don't need to tell you where the left comes down on that. But it's an important issue. Voter fraud, election fraud exists. There's a story, I think we probably tweeted out, at least I did it at Tom Fitton, and I'm sure, I don't know, Michael, did we tweet it out on, yeah, we tweeted it out on our feed as well at Judicial Watch, about a story out of Indiana where a bunch of fraudulent registration forms were filed by a left-wing group. So it's Acorn all over again. It looks like happening in Indiana. It's again less than 2 months before the election. There's fraud taking place. So it's a serious issue. We need to track it, and don't let the left let you think it's just a conspiracy theory. But there are actual crimes evidently taking place related to election fraud now under investigation. So a lot of important information at Judicial Watch here this week. Again, get the book, educate yourself on the IRS issue, educate yourself on these new Clinton email developments, and if you so desire, let you share your views with about the impeachment of the IRS Commissioner with members of the House, your representatives. Let them know what you think needs to be done and whether or not you think they should kick the can down the road till after the election, until after, not with a new Congress, but the lame duck, when there's little to zero accountability. So thanks for tuning in, and have a great weekend. I'm Tom Fitton with Judicial Watch.